Hello, one and all, and welcome to the Monster Hunter Wilds wishlist. I've uploaded many videos containing Monster Hunter content on the channel for a while now, as far back as January of 2019, where Vinx and I hunted the Anjanath. Ever since then, Monster Hunter World became one of my favourite games to play, repelling Zora Magdaros, venturing to Celiana, and beating the shit out of countless Zenoga for a shiny stone that gives me one extra bonus. And from that small seed all those years ago, it took us from a Diablos den and a Nergigante nest to entire locales at once, and as far as even hunting history itself. From then, Vinx gifted me Rise for the Switch, and while I haven't been able to make any Switch content just yet, I've still been playing the hell out of that and Sunbreak, returning to my hammer roots and giving everything native to Kimura and Elgato brain damage. That being said, after playing a lot of Rise and realising how much I love the series, I wanted to make a massive full circle roundup of Monster Hunter Worldborn to A, reminisce on the experiences we both had through the lands, and B, to pay respects to the game for giving us so much enjoyment and means of catching up, especially in the dark times. And so I decided to wrangle in Vinx for a How to Hunt finale almost, titled How to Hunt Monster Hunter World, where we selected 5 topics, those being the 4 Musketeers, the world of Monster Hunter World, the Elder Dragons, Subspecies Showdown, and 5 to the finish. The goal was to go through each of these monsters to properly walk memory lane, maybe for the fight, maybe because the fight went unfinished, and Furious Rajang specifically because we paid him absolutely zero attention whatsoever.
I did my waiting! 12 years of it!
However, the unfortunate circumstance of us growing older, becoming adults, and having to hold demanding jobs got in the way, and so recording sessions became few and far between for me to get the video out when I wanted, which was before the Wilds trailers and demo released. Although one small segment I went through in those sections was the likelihood and more so whether we wanted monsters from World, Iceborne, Rise, and Sunbreak, including previously released subspecies or variants, to return in Wilds in the form of a tier list. Because I've been loving the longer form videos in the past, such as the boss rankings, I thought as a saving grace for the franchise, I'd create a tier list as its own video, maybe with a few original clips mixed in somewhere. The tiers I'm working with today are simply Inevitable and Want, Inevitable and Don't Want, Don't Want, or Best Not F***ing Bother Mate. If you guys want another optional challenge, then take a shot every time I say monster or fight. Again, that is a joke, you'll either lose your liver or die. So let's welcome back our hunters and palicos as they walk us through all 129 monsters, and I give my thoughts on their return to Wilds. Disclaimer, this video is written and recorded before I know any major confirmations on returning monsters, if there have been any made. If there is the scenario where a monster has been confirmed to be returning, there will be text saying so in the top corner. Great Jagras is one of those welcome to world monsters, kinda like Bambaro was to Iceborne or the great monsters were to Rise, and for the most part I love the I'm big and I don't give a f*** monsters that have no actual weaponry bar their ability to fall over on you. The likes of Dodo Gamma, Tetranodon, and I'd put money on the big frog thing from First Wilds trailer doing a similar thing. I think it's a given that there's going to be some form of beginner fight right off the start at Wilds, and I would love for it to be Great Jagras. Kulu-Yaku is again one of those goofy monsters that make people like it just on its clumsy charm. It's literally just a chicken that likes rocks, pots, and eggs. Going through Rise and Sunbreak and realising that all you get to do is bully Kulu for an hour at the start can be a bit of a tedium, but here's a fan favourite punching bag. Considering its standing in the community, it's been in 2 separate games on the bounce now, and I would not be surprised nor annoyed if it made it into a 3rd. I wasn't a massive fan of Puke to begin with. As a standard in games, I tend to take a massive disliking to anything that deals skills in either poison or damage over time effects, which is why I hosted Bloodstar Beast on the bottom half of my Bloodborne ranking, and Farron Keep remains one of my least favourite Dark Souls 3 areas. But on investigation runs, a whole campaign through Rise, and spam farming them in now, Puke's really grown on me, and I like him a lot now. In regard to where I list him, I did have him in just Want for a while, but then realised that in a couple of the Wilds trailers, the Hunter literally wears his armour, so I'm fairly certain it's an inevitability at this point. Coral, on the other hand, I could happily go without, and the same goes for most subspecies who base their whole theme of work as same monster, different blight. Sometimes it works and makes the monster better, but in almost all cases, it just doesn't hit for me, and Coral falls onto that side of the conversation. Slow movement in games is traditionally, for me, really annoying. The faster I can get through a fight and move on, the better, and Mud is a pretty surefire sign that a speedy hunt isn't going to be on the agenda. But when the mud comes from Geratodus, I'm happy taking just as long as it takes. He's a funny little mud guy, yes, he may look stupid, he's the only monster that didn't qualify for the Guarding Lands, and no one really likes the Lavasioth or Beatotus variants, but he's a funny little mud guy, look at him! Unfortunately, the general low standing within the community means I'm unsure as to whether he's making a return, but I'm sure sitting above the likes of Magmadron and Blood Orange B10 in the 20th Anniv ranking means he's got at least a small chance. Speaking of being stuck in the mud, Baroth is a humongous pain in my arse. In both World and Rise, I was a hammer main by the time I got to him, and whilst blunt weapons are better for fighting him, it's still infuriating that the fight consists of spend one half bludgeoning him to breaks and the other half hitting exclusively that area. I don't want to have to fight him again, but I can see myself doing so since he's in almost every game, and the vast majority of Wild's trailers footage so far has just been pure desert. Toby Kadachi is one of those monsters that has found itself in the good books of literally every hunter, and even though I've fought him an inconceivable amount of times through both World and Rise, every time the fight just keeps getting better and better. The way he uses his surroundings to jump off trees and walls, using the spines on his tail to snipe you from a distance. No matter how much you claim to have mastered the fight, there's always a point where you'll find yourself on the receiving end. Even though he was introduced into World and made a notable appearance in Rise, I genuinely think he's too much of a fan favourite to leave out of Wilds. Viper, on the other hand, I'll refer back to Puke. I tend to take a massive disliking to anything to do with poison in games, and Viper is a better example. The poor boy has tuberculosis, bless him.
Well, I got lumbago. It's very serious.
But that can't distract from the fact that every time I have to hunt him, I'm tortured with the so close yet so far feel of what could have been. Not a fan. Speaking of being a fan though, holy f***, Anjanath is probably top 5 favourite monsters of all time, and he better be in Wilds. This is the monster that started it all, and it was hilarious to see the progression from that video to post-Fatalis hunts. Like, just look at this. I'll do it. Right, starting it off well. Starting it off with an old classic. Boomfa. The yeet.
Tail is coming off, wait till after a hot minute.
Yeah, I was doing that far too often last time. Yay!
Oh,
Need to, like... I see Tommy on the side just got both of my bandages clutched onto the sides, giving him so much grief. He's been stunned, he's been stabbed, and he's been mounted within 5 minutes of going to work.
That tail's come off.
His tail's come off! I remember when I first did the Anjanath video, there was no intro, there was no commentary, it was just we decided to hunt the Anjanath, one of the hardest monsters in the game, without knowing the rest of the game, and even then, just completely and utterly rinsed him in the first minute of fighting him.
I'm just so used to
like my hammer build that I've got, I'm waiting until half turn before I get Sunbreak. I'm so used to this wire bug reliant build that I've got.
It's more reliant.
Oh, have it! Have it! So I've just done a downward slash on his head for 96. In what world should I tell me
He's going for it!
Boom, stagger.
Oh, we're not starting. I've just got out of his phase, man. For f***ing sake, I've just started to weed myself off Jojo.
No, and there's another one. Oh, there it is. No pain, no gain. Have it! Oh, shit. Okay. I need to go, I need to go, I need to go, I need to go. Oh, there we go. Lovely. very successful. Folga Anjanath is evidence that perfection can be improved upon and is definitely the correct side of same monster different blight. I mean, substituting fire for thunder may seem a trivial trade on surface level, but genuinely I think compiling an average overall popularity in World and Iceborne, the Anjanath sits at least in the top 10. They're both just so good, and the Thunderstorm show in Wilds have promise of his return. This next entry is tough, and I'm going to lump together a fair few monsters here because the Rathalos is essentially the flagship for the entire series, with at least some variation of him being the poster boy for a fair few games, and even making his way into other games through collab events, most notably being Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Final Fantasy XIV, and everyone's favourite mobile game. I'm also going to lump Rathian into this equation just because the monsters and their subspecies are extremely similar. The original monsters themselves, I think, is inevitable that they're going to make Wilds. I don't think they've missed a single game so far, and I doubt they'll miss one now. Their fluorescent variants, the Pink Rathian and Azure Rathalos, I think are okay monsters. They're a bit more aggressive and a bit faster, but that's about it. If I want to limit each monster to having 2 variants, if any, when it comes to the Wrath duo, I doubt there's anyone that prefers the Azure and the Pink to the Silver and Gold. Despite the fact their shell is harder and they're a bit larger, there's a certain aura about them that makes me more excited to fight them. I'm also going to take this chance to say that I don't give a single f*** about the Apex monsters, so don't expect me to talk about them much.
You cast testicular torsion.
Nice try, those were my
Testicular torsion casters always acting tough. Right until the wizard casts Mend Butt Crack.
Next up, my favourite little flashbang, the Titsy Yaku. I do like him just a little, but in the context of if I couldn't finish a hunt, I'd go to the Coral Highlands and beat the everlasting fuck out of him. He's definitely the lesser known of the Yaku clan in World and Rise. I don't think it's an inevitability for his return, and I doubt it'd be a major upset if he doesn't. For Paolumu, I think I'm going to lend Vinx the microphone for this one.
Get them both out, and I keep the hand. Get it! Get it!
There are some monsters that deserve the mantle of Great. Great Jagras being one of them, and for the start of Rise, I think Great Baggy and Great Izuchi also wear it well, but for Great Gyros, I'm quite frankly not arsed. If we'd gone to the Rotten Vale a lot earlier instead of it being the 4th locale, and we hadn't adjusted to the standards of monsters like Tobi, Kadachi and Anjanath, I think that Great Gyros would have held some merit, but the Rotten Vale just doesn't hit for me, and quite frankly, neither does he. Same thing goes for Radabara, big f***ing Beyblade with sleep attacks, I don't care for him. Legiana is a tough middle area for me. It's just something that I fight if I have to. Cases such as story missions or high-level investigations, no ill feelings, but no overwhelming admiration. Since he missed Rise, I can imagine that it'll make a full reappearance, and honestly, I wouldn't mind. I did hit the most diabolical mount on him though.
Takes your kids and your shit.
Hey, if it wasn't for the Jawas, R2 would never have been reunited. Thank you, fella! Shrieking Legiana is a bit of a different story though. From my research, it's literally just more deadly, so having them both seems a bit unnecessary. I'd much prefer if the spot was left open for a much wider loved subspecies. For example, the Ebony Odogaron. Him and Odogaron, in my opinion, are peak monster design and are absolutely brilliantly placed in the game. With the exception of Legiana and Paolumu as flying monsters, the previous ground-based fights included Radabarn, Great Gyros and Titsy, 2 of the 3 being local to the Rotten Vale, no one's favourite area. But the nature of the locale is drastically overshadowed when these 2 come to play. It's a dog with more claws than it needs, jumping off the walls and inflicting bleed, and in Ebony's case, dragon blight. It'll definitely wall you if you aren't used to the faster paced fights, which you won't be at this point, but there's nothing more satisfying than catching it on the chin as it's darting around and sending them to the I'm unsure as to whether it'll be included in Wilds. There is a suitable looking area for it, but I have a feeling that it's too specifically designed for La Labarina. They certainly wouldn't be unwelcome though. Continuing on with peak monsters, I love Diablos, genuinely like an unconditional amount. This is the first instance of backtracking I'm going to have in the list. I'm not going to bother with Monoblos. They may be the same monster but with one horn, but I've personally never fought one. Diablos was just a perfect monster for me to fight through World. I was a hammer Hammer main at this point using entirely Rathalos gear and an Ice Hammer, and so upgrading to Diablos armor was perfect. This gave me key skills like Slugger, Marathon Runner, Critical Draw Heroics, etc. Not to mention the armor boost giving a +3 Bludgeoner, skyrocketing my hammer build to unprecedented levels of bonk. Further on down the line, I bore witness to the Black Diablos, not just a female Diablos, but a female Diablos in heat, meaning it's more territorial, and that's what makes it more aggressive. This set gave all the benefits of the normal Diablos set, plus Pathbreaker, meaning that on top of the boundless stunning power I had just received, I could also break the kneecaps of everything that had kneecaps. These two, if I had to rank them in world, would probably sit comfortably within my top 15, and I desperately need them back to bully the out of all the Balahara. When I mentioned backtracking, it's because I also have Bloodbath Diablos on my roster. Now I realise that Bloodbath may just be a varied version of the Apex Diablos, but the idea of a Diablos that has encountered a hunter before, barely survived, and developed a seething rage against them just sounds badass as and the fact that the more damage it receives, the more damage it does, backs it up. I doubt we'll have too many Diablos variants back, especially since the area has no cactus, and since Diablos has been in every game so far, it deserves a break. But if possible, I'd love an encounter with at least a Bloodbath. Zora Magdaros. I'm fairly certain that I speak for the entire Monster Hunter community when I say that if this monster does not appear in Wilds, we riot. I'm talking storming the Capcom HQ, finding the CEO and giving him the most devastating DDT suplex in the world. I speak, of course, of Dodo Gamma. It's not very likely he makes it back, I don't think, but if the funny farting monkey's returning, I think he at least has a shot. Brownie points if the tiny boy returns as well. In terms of Dratidus variants, there aren't a lot that are majorly beloved by the community. Exhibit A being Lavasioth, the annoying attack patterns of Jura, plus the bollocks hardened skin properties of Baroth, not to mention the constant need for a cold drink, as well as the chance you get dive bombed by B-52. I personally would say not inevitable don't want, but I think Vinx puts up a decent argument. The cool no shot. Are we saying no shot for Lavasioth?
We can debate it, but I'm not being funny, mate. You're not going to play Wilds. For f***'s sake, what the f*** is Lavasioth?
Where were you?
I was right here where you left me. I was waiting, and then I was crying.
Uragon can join him. Get I'm gonna put you in a situation. Imagine you're having a nice walk through a park, maybe. A nice early Saturday morning. Sun's out, but there's a nice cool breeze in the air. Nothing that can dampen your mood. Until... Bazelgeuse is such a good monster, and I doubt there's anyone within the community that could speak a bad word about him. For such an inconvenience of it dive bombing the occasional hunt, it kinda makes up for by having turf wars with almost every monster. And for those it doesn't, it still takes off a considerable chunk of damage just by being there. As for a one-on-one, there's nothing more satisfying than have a Bazel slide his head along the ground leaving a trail of explosions just to get the full force of a hammer that sends him to Jesus. There's realistically not too much between Bazel and its cousin the Seething. Nothing more than the bombs coming down at a more consistent rate, the bombs being bigger and therefore having bigger explosions. But you'd genuinely be surprised of how much difference this makes for such little change. This is one of the rare examples in games where an already perfect fight is improved upon. The Seething fight in Iceborne and Sunbreak is an absolutely brilliant monster to fight, and I would love to see him back. That being said, I'm unsure as to whether we'll get him in base game. Bazelgeuse came out in both World and Rise, but Seething didn't appear until both of the DLCs. So if we don't see him in the base game of Wilds, I think it's almost a certainty that they'll go for the hat trick and bring him with the DLC. One example of this not going so well is the Kirin. Now granted, I love Kirin, and I think the thunderstorms of the desert area in Wilds is a really good opportunity to see his fight get overhauled depending on the weather. His fight is pretty different to most others. There are larger monsters like Diablos and Anjanath that move slowish and hit harder, and other smallish monsters like Tsitsiaku and Kuliaku that don't hit as hard but can move in a really agile manner. Kirin takes the best portion of both of these variants and makes them infinitely better. He's a unicorn for Christ's sake, and most of the time will be outsized by almost everything. Unless you're doing Namiel research, in that case he's fucking massive. That's another massive fucking Kirin.
Holy shit! That's gigantic!
I know.
What the f***
Mega Kirin.
Hopping around, zapping you with lightning, playing hammer to fight him is a challenge purely because you can't get many solid hits on him, but that time you do is satisfying. And honestly, I would love to see him back, but I don't think it's an inevitability. The alternative version, Orochi Kirin, just substitutes Thunder Blight for Ice Blight, and since I've never fought him, I'm unsure how you can translate that in terms of his Thunder Strike attacks, so I think there's just no shot for Orochi. Going back a step to when a near perfect fight is made even better by just a small change. Games rarely, if ever, get it right multiple times in one game. Monster Hunter World did it multiple times in one game. The Nergigante is an absolute menace to World, and if he comes with wilds, I think he could wreck all sorts of shit. He missed out on Rise and Sunbreak, so honestly, I think he's due some redemption. I can't really talk much about the Nergigante without also wanting to talk about its brother from Iceborne, the Ruiner. There isn't a massive overhaul for Ruiner, only that his attack style is more intelligent and seems to have stronger barbs on his body, but makes such a massive difference to the fight. Nergigante, who introduces himself at the Zora Sieges, and is inadvertently the reason you fail the first one, boasts the title the Extinction Dragon.
Oh my god, he's so goddamn cool!
Ruiner just arrives before you fight Shara Ishvalda, the monster who has been causing chaos across the entire world and can shape entire continents, just to throw itself at the monster after you fight it, killing it with only a few blows. In the world ranking, Nergigante got 2nd and Ruiner got 9th, averaging 6th overall out of maybe 100-ish monster species. You don't do that by being a There's honestly so much more I could say about Nergigante, like how it instills feelings of dread in anyone that hears the first 5 beats of his theme, or how his roar is one of the most intimidating in the whole franchise. But I've got to limit myself so this video isn't a year long. I want both, but I think Nergi is actually inevitable and Ruiner isn't.
Oh,
Oh, okay, he's not too bad. Probably what, dude, just shanking his arm up a little bit.
what is it? It's like the hardest fight in base world.
Yeah, but now we have Fatalis gear, the Clutch Claw.
I'm coming for you!
Oh, well,
This is an Arch-Temple Kushala as well.
You back together!
ow! Threw Kushala at me!
Oh, yeah, he got beaten up so hard that he got thrown at a hunter and he's gonna leave.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa. That's too damn bad!
Teostra is a strange one for me. In terms of the 3 elders you fight through the world-based story, he is my absolute favourite. He shines so much brighter than Val and Kushala, but most of the time I come out of a hunt thinking that that was more of a chore than something I actually enjoyed doing. His personal arena is sick, don't get me wrong, but I just don't enjoy trying to alter my playstyle every 3 seconds when he decides to switch forms. Normal Teo is just bullyable. When he has fire sparks around him, he sets them down as landmines, and pure fire version just means you take tick damage the longer you're near him, which prolongs the fight far too much for me. I do think he'll make a return, but I could do without him. By that similar course of action further on down the list, we can also throw Lunastra out the window as well.
Even more so, I fucking hate Lunastra.
I'm sure by him being my favourite of the 3 tells you exactly what you need to know about the other 2. Moving on to Kushala, Rise made him a tiny bit better to fight, but him and his f***ing whirlwind friends can just f*** off. Rusted Kushala can join him, I've never fought him and I don't much want to. And the final Elder Dragon of the trio, Valhazark and his cousin the Black Veil. Any monster I have to switch around my gems so I can't cosplay Slugger Sir Bonkulon.
One of our favourite characters around the IGN office is our own Sir Bonkulon, which used this weapon to defeat the entire game. I'm sat here doing this and I could be doing the Sir Bonkulon guide.
Just so I don't lose half of my health the instant one of these guys looks at me means I do not want in the bin they go.
Know your fucking place, trash.
Another good example of Monster Hunter making a near-perfect monster even better with a subspecies. I don't think anyone has a bad word about Deviljho or Savage. They are pretty much just stables of the community now, and I love how a generically easy monster like Great Jagras or Kulu can suddenly turn into a massive chore just because Deviljho decided to use them as a chew toy and then throw them like a bowling ball at a tree or something. Savage isn't too dissimilar, pretty much always being in range because once he eats something, his metabolism is that good it burns off the calories instantly, so now he's back to being hungry again. The theme for both also follows Nergy lore, where if you hear the first 3 or so notes from his theme, then you know you're f***ed. Considering they missed out on Rise, I definitely want them back in Wilds, and in all honesty, I do think it's inevitable. Moving on to the final boss of World, Xeno'jiiva. Xeno is a brilliant fight to end the base game of World, and can definitely find itself on people's good side. The first impressions of this guy just hit the right spot. From the design of it, the attack patterns hitting like a truck, yet being really unpredictable and clumsy since Xeno's just a baby. Not to mention the guy who wrote the descriptions of the drops must have been on some next level Shakespeare type shit. The shell, tempered to act as a vessel for the flames of the underworld. The soul scale, radiating vestiges of the hereafter. The claw, said to cleave the soul from the flesh. Unfortunately, I think that there's no shot that we see Xeno'jiiva again, but only because of the emergence of its older brother, Safi. What can I say about this monster that doesn't immediately boil down to Safi is a peak monster? First of all, he is the most dragon-looking elder in my opinion, and in the wiki bio is described as the perfect being, since it can literally reshape and destroy entire ecosystems if it feels like it. The best thing by far about the Safi fight, I don't care about being sniped by laser shots. I don't care about the brilliant siege aspect of the fight. I don't care about the brilliant theme. All I care about is Sapphire of the Emperor. If there is anyone that can look at this and tell me that this isn't the best looking AoE last stand attack out there, I would very much like to meet you, so I can sock you in the face. I really think there's going to be at least some semblance of a Safi attack in Wild. But I would love it if they brought him back at some point. And Kolv to Roth, I would love to finish a fight with her, but honestly, I think there's no chance for a return.
If you survive a horror/thriller monster or killer, 24 hours, yeah, believe it. Would you do it, yes or no? If yes, what horror/thriller, antagonist would you choose?
Yes, I would, Freddy Krueger, because I would just not.
No, he does
I
not
would
count.
just not go to sleep.
I forgot to mention that bit. Do not say Freddy Krueger. I would choose Chucky. I'm not being funny. Right. He's
looking to make it safe.
I think the cheese pick is Michael Myers, just for the simple fact that he is like 6'7" and he is 400 pounds of just lean muscle. But I don't think I've ever in my life in any form of media seen him run. I've only ever seen him walk, so you just start on one end.
Roundabout. He's taken to Milton Keynes.
That's Michael Myers' one weakness, Milton Keynes.
Yeah.
Moving on to Iceborne, the starting few monsters are really hit or miss for me, and the same thing is true with the first hunts in Rise and Sunbreak, and none hit closer to miss than that of Beotodus. So well known that Vinx, the person who got me into Monster Hunter, completely forgot that Beo existed.
Who's Beotodus?
Who the f*** is that guy?
I mean, it's literally just another Rathalos clone, but native to the snow. There isn't a lot more I can say. He isn't going to be in Wilds, and I'm not that bothered about it. Going back to the hit or miss analogy though, Iceborne actually does a stand-up job of showing you both parts. Beo is, in a word, shit. But on the other hand, you have monsters like Banbaro that completely flip the script and give you a brilliant fight. He's almost like a mix of Anjanath and Diablos, but scaled for the beginning of the DLC. An aggressive two-legged monster with big horns, except instead of using his horns to dig, he grabs tree trunks and steamrolls anything in his way. I'm a bit disappointed we didn't get to see any of him in Rise or Sunbreak, and I know that so far there haven't been any ice areas revealed for Wilds, but I would love him to come back. I'd want it. The next species of monsters I'm going to introduce a new tier, I think. Barioth is a peak monster for Iceborne, and I think is beloved by the community. I could spend hours talking about how good he is, but I need to keep the entries brief. A saber-toothed tiger that can fly and create whirlwinds isn't something to scoff at, and he has on multiple occasions sent me back to camp. And Frostfang is so fucking cool. I haven't fought. And before you throw your toys out the pram, yes, I'm moving Orochi, Rusted, and Bloodbath there too, since I also haven't fought them. And yes, I will continue to give my thoughts on monsters that I haven't haven't fought, but this will be their default. If I had to put the Barrios anywhere on the list, I definitely want them involved somewhere, but I think the Frostfang may not be as inevitable as regular Barrios. Naga Cougar is another monster I could spend hours ranting about, and every single time I love coming up against him. He clings to the trees, has blades on his arms, a mace for a tail, he even has the funny anime eye thing. He's just the whole package of what a fun fight needs to be. The fight is fast paced, so it requires you to be on your toes, and inflicts bleed, so dodging needs to be at least passable. Over the course of Rise and World, I've fought him what seems to be a little more than often, and he does grind on me a bit, but I do enjoy him. And Lucent is another example of a fight being made greater with a later entry. The Sunbreak version of Lucent is a massively impressive development on regular Naga. He can inflict poison now, he can jump and attack faster, and the anime eye thing actually has a purpose now. Where it was just there to make him look like a fucking badass, it now assists the player in periodically showing where Lucent is, since he can turn invisible. Did I mention he can turn invisible? I'm not going to bother ranking any of the millions of other subspecies or variants there are for Naga, but I'm sure as shit hope we get both Lucent and Naga in Wilds. Take everything I've said about Naga Cougar, swap its mace tail for a great sword, swap its blade hands for a whetstone mouth, keep the agility but increase the size tenfold, and spray paint it red, and suddenly you have the Glavenus. In terms of non-elders in Iceborne, Glavenus is up there probably in my top 5. In fact, top 5 world/Iceborne non-elder dragon monster species: 5 Brachydios, 4 Glavenus, 3 Rajang, 2 Diablos, 1 Basilgeuse. You disagree, cry about it. You want to complain and say, "Ooh, no gigante, Rosa no good to be in your top 5. You shut the fuck up and f***ing b***ing a horse and cry about it some more. Try 7th and... In my opinion, it was a crime not to have Glavenus in Rise, and I think he would have fit brilliantly in the lava caverns or the sandy plains. I mean, imagine the turf wars between him and Magnamalo. It would have been so cool. But all things considered, a T-Rex with a sword for a tail and a whetstone for a mouth that can set the tail ablaze definitely deserves more spotlight time. And so does its cousin, the acidic Glavenus. Instead of having a tail of sulfur or something, it has greater control and therefore greater agility with its tail sword, making fights with acidic a lot more fast-paced and a lot more deadly. And I also think that they both deserve a massive spotlight boost.
Pokemon are suddenly cannot battle for this elite.
Oh, the tally just keeps going up and up. I'm on a flawless record right now.
Not including legendaries, choose any 3 Pokemon to have. Why would you choose them?
I think Machamp just to do all like the heavy lifting. Goldengo, so I never have to work a day in my life ever again. And Lopunny.
Why Lopunny?
There are no laws against the Pokemon, Batman.
No, Joker.
No, Joker.
For me, number 1, Charizard. Why, I know we're not battling, he can fly and he can breathe fire. Number 2, Ekans.
Eka, that's a niche pick.
No, what's one of the most valuable substances in the world?
Oh, snake venom.
Milk that dry.
There are no laws against the
Pokemon. Milking an Ekans back there. And third, Vaporeon. Because hey guys,
did you know that?
Did you know?
Female Pokemon breeding Vaporeon?
Next is a monster that I had a really good opinion of to begin with, but just over the course of Iceborne and Rise, I must have fought him like once every 3 or so hunts. Tigrex. I used to love the Tigrex, but over time fighting him, being chased to the ends of the earth, and taking damage from his roar of all things, I could honestly go another Monster Hunter game and not be bothered he isn't there, but he is in every fucking game, so it's very doubtful that he'll miss the next one. Brute Tigrex is slightly different. I have a slightly better appreciation for Brute Tigrex, purely because I fought him enough to fill the sweet spot of fighting him enough to get the armor I wanted for my sword and shield build, yet not enough to make the fight a drag for me. That being said, I also don't fancy him in Wilds just because Brute Tigrex has a stronger draw and is more resilient, meaning that if my opinion of regular Tigrex doesn't change, Brute's fight is essentially the same but longer, and I can't be asked for that. Molten Tigrex, first of all, looks awesome, but since it's bigger, I really can't be asked for its fight, just because if I do, then the hitboxes of the charge and the spins are going to be absolutely insane. Plus, I haven't fought him, so we all know where he goes. Back to the peak tier, Brachydios can happily stay, and I would welcome this man into my house for Christmas dinner if it meant he returns in Wilds. As for Raging Brachydios, I would happily let him into my house for Christmas dinner, then let him shag my wife while I watch in the corner if it meant he came back to Wilds. Take a look at this one clip and tell me that Raging Brachydios is not an absolutely peak monster, and the theme just screams that this is the alpha of the Brachy species. In terms of the final 4 monsters I fought in World before finishing the entire story, what I called Raging Bracky may seem the outlier considering that the others were Kolv, Elatrion and Fatalis, all massively powerful Elder Dragons, but honestly, Raging was my joint favourite fight of the alongside Fatalis, and definitely deserves a shot in Wilds, although I think regular Bracky may just be a little bit more inevitable for a return. Velkhana is desperately loved by the community, and I do love coming up against her. An elegant Elder Dragon creating armour from the frost and dropping nothing but Aura Crown Horns. Or a Crown Horn, or a Crown Horn, or a Crown Horn. Something different, please. or a Crown Horn. The flagship of Iceborne has some brilliant choreography to her fight, like using her tail as a rapier and her frost AoE attacks always catching me out. Not to mention her iteration in Sunbreak was also very welcome. However, I think the likelihood of her returning for base Wilds is a bit of a long shot. A DLC return though would again be very, very welcome. Namiel sits on a very similar vein to Velkhana, but a lot further on both axes. I don't think she's as inevitable for a return as Velkhana is, but at the same time I want her to come back so much more. I mean, look at this intro cutscene for her and tell me that this isn't one of the best minor Elder Dragon intros you've ever seen. I mean, you can't really get more creative with a monster than giving its attack patterns and abilities the exact same nature of throwing a toaster in a bathtub. And to finish off Iceborne's story, Shara Ishvalda. Unfortunately, off the bat, I think there'd be no shot for a return for Shara, and the same will likely be said for all of the final boss types in the games. But I think if there is a return, then it would be a very welcome addition from the whole fanbase. First off, the rock armor it has is absolutely stunning, and I don't think I have to justify why I like the second phase. The unsettling nature of this beast is criminally well done, from the fleshy tendrils throwing sound waves at you, to a spirit bomb, to the fact that the eyes of this thing never blink and never ever stop looking directly at you. Not the hunter, the player. It was a brilliant final boss for Iceborne, but again, there is unfortunately no shot for him returning. There was one that I saw a while ago, Donald Trump describing the events of the Navy SEAL team that took down I know that sounds really niche. Obama would sit there and go, group of Navy SEALs, the best America has to offer, did their jobs, they did this, that and the other. And then Trump was like, they broke through his wall, they blew a hole in his wall and they went with dogs, beautiful dogs. Obama made it sound like an actual organised military operation where people took their time to organise it. Trump made it seem like some bloke was just chilling in his living room. His wall exploded, 7 blokes in military gear, 4 dogs in Kevlar and 2 robots broke into his house. Zenogre is another sticky one. I don't mind him, but I don't hold any particular admiration for him, and that sentence alone is going to trigger a lot of people considering that he is the undisputed best monster of Monster Hunter in its entirety. He isn't a bad monster per se, the #1 rank backs that up. It's just I never really find myself going into the hunt being all hyped up as perhaps I should be. All that's being said, it's undeniable that he looks awesome, and his fight does have some definite highlights. It's such a cool concept to me that Zenogre is essentially a habitat for thunderbugs, creating a sort of symbiotic relationship. They grant him electric energy so they have a safe haven free from harm, lest their predators come into the sight of his Zenogre. I do think it would be a sin for Capcom to leave him out of Wilds.
Looks like Zenogre isn't in Wilds.
Wait, what?
And if I'm honest, it wouldn't cause me any harm if he was. As for Stygian, on the other hand, he substitutes his Thunderblight for Dragonblight, and on the opposite side of the spectrum to Basilgeuse, such a simple change can make a fight so much more mediocre. In regard to the top 3 rankings, it's definitive that the subspecies aren't as good as the original, with Zenogre, Nergigante and Lagiacrus sitting at 1, 2 and 3, and Stygian, Ruiner and Abyssal sitting further down in 11th, 9th and 12th respectively. Not to mention Thunderlord sitting at 58 and Ivory at 97. Now, sitting that highly in a list of 228 monsters is nothing if not impressive, but Stygian doesn't hit for me. I don't have any reason to think that he'd be in Wilds, and it wouldn't displease me too much to see him out of there. Yangaruga is a monster I've never really had too much experience with. I've fought him a couple of times over the course of my Guarding Lands farming, but in all honesty, I have no real reason to like or dislike him. He's kind of just a chill guy that sat there most of the time. Same with with Scarred. They had such a good opportunity to make Scarred such a bigger threat than regular Yangaruga. The likes of Furious Rajang and Scorn Magdamalo make such a good extra impact based solely on the fact that their past running with a hunter makes them a lot more aggressive and powerful towards us. But in both cases, Yangaruga is a silly bird fella that sticks his nose in the ground and gets clapped about for fun. No shot for both of them. Through the process of Iceborne, you start off relatively simple, fighting a poisonous snake squirrel, a sleepy night-night pillow, and then a weird fish lizard thing, through to a master assassin, a sword-wielding T-Rex, and a boxing champion, and after a few elders you fight a literal god that can shape entire ecosystems and continents to fit its will.
Then you fight a funny monkey.
I love Rajang, and his fight in both Iceborne and Rise is a masterpiece. Besides the obvious Super Saiyan reference, he is a literal jacked as f*** monkey. Once you get him enraged, there are specific conditions to get him unenraged, and if you wait too long going for the head or the arms, it becomes obsolete. He hits like a truck, hits you with a spinning fist, a butt kick, and a literal... If you trap him in a shock trap, he'll just straight up crush it. If you trap him in a pitfall, he'll keep swinging at you. It's almost as if
There's no letters in the chimpanzee alphabet that spell out the words that's set for.
Furious, on the other hand,
Now that is an Avengers level threat.
it's a regular Rajang, but he has no tail. The tail is what allowed you to de-enrage a normal Rajang. And Furious is constantly enraged. It's the small period of Kamehameha beams straight up vomiting energy strikes on you and beating the f*** out of you for fun. But the entire fight, not to mention the monsters that you canonically fight after Furious, are Frostfang, fair enough, seems a fair fight, but then Elatrion and Fatalis. There is honestly nothing bad about the Rajang fights. I think Rajang is inevitable, and I would love to see the
Funny monkey
come back at some point. And as much as I want the Furious to come back, I unfortunately have to default him to the haven't fought. Sorry, pal. Elatrion is such a bitch. I honestly couldn't give two shits about him. I don't care that Eschaton Judgment is a sick AoE one mechanic with a hard but fair counter. I don't care that the fight changes just as you get the hang of fighting him, just so you're never given an advantage. Him and his massive nose can get absolutely f***ed. I spent over a month on this fight alone, and I didn't want him in Rise. I don't want him in Wilds. He can go and die for all I care. Moving on to a much larger world-ending threat, and definitely a much better fight, Fatalis. Fatalis was never the name of the actual monster, but was instead meant to describe the existence of something, a tale passed down from generation to generation to generation. The idea that you aren't just fighting a monster here, you're fighting actual history, is a massively cool idea to me, and it's just the start of what makes his world fight so amazing. Firstly, look at this fucking thing. Secondly, look at what it did to the arena with one breath. And thirdly, listen to this fucking music. Rounding out the entire game with a revised version of Proof of a Hero just brings a perfect ending to the game, and when you beat Fatalis, you actually feel like you deserve it. I mean, this is the first fight I had to actually put strategy into. Before coming into fighting one-on-one instantly, I'd Gilly Mantle up with my heavy artillery charm and instantly fire off 10 shots with a cannon, downing him and following it up with a double mega barrel bomb big hit, and most likely sending him into the wall straight afterwards. I don't think there's any way, shape or form that they try and better the fight from Iceborne, but I sure as hell hope that they try. In terms of the other Fatalis variants, both instantly go into the have not fought, but I'd at least want a chance to see how they work. White Fatalis, also known as Old Fatalis, has the ability to shoot red lightning and apparently can also regenerate, whilst Red Fatalis has a longer range on his fire attacks and can summon meteors. I doubt either are coming for a return, but I would definitely love to give them a go.
Times are making me laugh recently, which is so called Mashal. Imagine if a gym bro went to Hogwarts, there'll be this like guy trying to cast a gold spell, right? And he'll just walk up and see that.
Do you know how you find the gym in Hogwarts?
You look for the dumbbell door.
And And now we move on to Rise, which, whilst not my favourite Monster Hunter game, still sits very comfortably at number 2. Let's please discount the fact that I've only ever played the 2. Rise was a breath of fresh air though. I got it on the Switch, so as long as I didn't want to hunt with anybody, I could do it from anywhere and everywhere. I've killed a Kezu in my kitchen, I've gutted a Gos Harag in my garden, and I've even ruined a Rajang in Cincinnati Zoo 2016. But it also gave me the opportunity to go back to my hammer roots, as I'm sure I've mentioned in the past. Not too soon after the Devil Joe video, I had a look at rolls and decided on switching from a hammer DPS build to a sword and shield support build. Since then, I've had very little time to dabble in hammer again, and it felt so good to going back to giving everything in my sights a concussion again.
Who am I kidding? Once I get started, ain't no one else waiting. No one. See me at the finish. I'm grinning right now because bitch I feel 10. Bitch I feel 10. Bitch I feel 10. Like my ice and foot. I make a move like a titan would. I am the legend, the ultimate reverend, the sultan, and I pulled the sword from the stone. Yeah, yeah. Once I get the charge, I count it up. I'm grinning right now because bitch I feel 10. Bitch I feel 10. Bitch I feel 10. Didn't think this teaser still had it in it. Here comes the giant.
By no means whatsoever have I had nearly as much playtime through Rise as World though, so I may not have as detailed opinions on certain monsters. I may even get things slightly wrong, and there are going to be a massive amount of have not fought entries, but on the other hand, I will be referencing some of the intro titles for some monsters to better say my thoughts, and I still think that I've had really solid encounters with each monster. So let's begin. I'm just going to kill 3 birds with one stone off the bat. The great monsters were very similar to Great Jagras, a good first encounter and a beefier, bigger version of some of the smaller monsters you've seen running about before. Great Azuchi and Great Baggy are the monsters that sit in the want category for me, and Great Roggy gets to sit on the naughty step. I really enjoyed hunting the first 2. They looked cool, I love how they worked well with their tiny versions, and the gimmicks are really cool fight-wise. Baggy deals in sleep, and Azuchi uses its tail as a sword, that which if it swings wrong, it will get stuck and give you some time to damage it. Roggy, on the other hand, deals in poison, a damage over time mechanic I'm sure I've made clear how much I dislike at this point. Doesn't really give enough for me to like him. I'm sticking them all in the inevitable category, since I think, like Great Jagras, at least one of the great monsters is due back for a tutorial fight, but it's Azuchi and Baggy that sit in the green, whilst Roggy can happily sit with the rest of the fodder. Arzuros is a funny little guy to me. He's tiny compared to other monsters in most scenarios, can be found chilling in a pond half the time. When he hits you with certain attacks, he steals honey from you. I mean, if Winnie the Pooh was a monster, then Arzuros is most likely him. So why on earth did someone think it was a good idea to look at this cuddly little fella and give him the nickname Bloodlust Incarnate? As a nickname I'd give to something that at least resembled a dragon, something that could run through an entire village at least without worry, not f***ing Paddington. He can go in the uninevitable and don't want. If I'd have fought Red Helm, I'm fairly certain he'd be there too. Lagombi, where do I start with you? Aknosom. I have real mixed feelings for Aknosom. In my head, he's pretty much the cooler Yaku of Rise, and I love it because I get to beat the shit out of another chicken for fun whenever I feel like it. But he always seems to find ways to prolong the fight, whether that's hitting me with his charge attack or fireballs, or seeming to want to fly away every time I get close. Still, I am a fan, and now has given me an appreciation for him and made me tilt more towards the he can stay side. I can see the vision behind Royal Ludroth. A big f***off lizard with a sponge for a mane gives him superiority because of his absorption ability, and the ecology of him is a really sound one, I'd say. The title is brilliant, main contender. Get it? Because main contender, like number 1, but he has the main. It's called wordplay.
Why is he called the main contender?
The point is that he is actually the main contender, but because he has a...
Because he's a dickhead!
Unfortunately, he's another one of the great monsters, just named differently, and the law of averages states that unfortunately he's joining Great Roggy and the do not want to. But Tetranodon!
To the top!
I love him with all my heart, and is probably my favourite Rise monster. He's a gluttonous who has no regard for his own safety, a platypus frog thing that will eat you and spit you back out. Look at him and tell me that there is a single thought in those eyes. Tetranodon is the first monster I farmed in Rise, just because while the armor looked straight out of a Fallout game, it also gave me some skills towards my decent hammer build, so he actually gave me a running start into the harder monsters. I would absolutely adore to see him back, and would happily give him a big hug if he was, but I think the big clumsy funny monster spots have already been taken up with this big bear and the funny farting monkey. Oh, but look at him, I mean this one's wearing a fedora for God's sake. The frenetic ascetic Bishaton and the dismal jester Blood Orange Bishaton are really cool monsters to me, and made me realise that the correct number of monkey monsters available should be very similar to the unwritten rule in terms of how many bikes you need to own. That being n+1, where n is the number that you currently have. I have a lot of fun fighting Bishaton, and I think a lot of it is to do with the monster's entire physiology being lethal, and it being one of the only monsters to my knowledge using a third-party weapon in the fight. He has blades on his arms, he has an opposable tail of all things, and uses berries and flash pods from Bishaton and flaming pine cones from Blood Orange. I never don't enjoy fighting the both of them, and like I said before, whilst the funny farting monkey is coming back and the inevitable return of Rajang is there, I'm unsure as to whether either of these monkeys make it back to the roster, but I sure as shit hope they do. Here is an image of an environment, and you are going to tell me whether or not there is a monster in said environment. There isn't, you say? Well, you're wrong, because that's a Bizarrios. F*** off. Volvidon is a funny little guy, nicknamed Crimson Cannonball. I can't really look at him without remembering he got launched at Lord Shen. I'm honestly not a fan. There isn't a lot that keeps me engaged with this fight. In most aspects, he's just Arzuros, but with a longer tongue and farts more, and apart from the jumping, that's the fight. There literally isn't anything else going on with him. The general community response reciprocates this, Exhibit A, but if this is referencing this, we are going to have some major issues. Credit where credit's due though. Tis the season and look at him getting all festive. Isn't he just adorable? Somnicanth and Aurora Somnicanth, kind of just nothing monsters for me, and there isn't a lot else I can say about them other than that. One deals in ice, the other deals in sleep, bong them on their head and send them on their way. I could do without. But the flagship, my god, what a brilliant fight Magnamalo has, and is the first instance in Rise of a monster having an individual theme that I unironically listen to in my spare time. Barbarous Beast playing now is amazing and fully commits Magnamalo to the Japanese heritage the game is based on. But using his tail as a sword that can also shoot out purple balls, having two katana-like blades on his wrist, and being the size of the fucking evergreen definitely provides a good fight. Whenever I'm not investigation farming or just playing for specific parts, I'll always load up the double Magnamalo hunt just because in terms of the fight, he is one of my favourites. I really want to see him in Wilds, and I think next-gen consoles are going to do him a massive world of good, and the nature of some of the flagships returning in games after is a good sign, but I think like Velkhana to Rise, it comes in the DLC. I can imagine there is everything amazing about Squad Magnamalo to look forward to, but as much as I'd love to put him in the same tier as Magnamalo, I'm ashamed to say that I'm not as far through the story to have fought him yet.
Do you prefer the randomness of gems or the randomness of charms?
See, I much prefer... I prefer gems rather than talismans.
I like because the RNG keeps me going more, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's more fun, considering that in, like, base game, in order to make talismans, I had to load into a Teostra hunt, find either a Rajang or Magnamalo, wyvern ride it to a Ratnikadaki, ride that to a Teostra, and then ride the Teostra back to the Magnamalo or the Rajang, pick up all the items, log out, log back in again, rinse and repeat for an hour, and then get, in fairness, like 30 charms, but those 30 charms have 2 1-slots, a defense up gem, and a single recovery up gem. You see that video where the one bloke, he finds some lube on Amazon, and there are like 27 different sizes, ranging from one tiny squirt bottle to one absolutely massive, like 30-litre drum. There are a set list of monsters that are a guarantee to come back in every Monster Hunter game. The likes of Baroth, Zinogre, Rathalos, etc. And I'm fairly certain if you asked for a top 10 from the community, then there is a high likelihood that Mizutsune is one of the monsters to make the list. I do like the Mizutsune fight at face value. It's a solid challenge for where you are, yet not impossible. And whilst the bubbles can cause you to slip and slide everywhere, there are some red ones that increase affinity and green ones that heal you, so it makes the fight fair. And so deserves to be put in the inevitable and want tier in my opinion. I'm not going to bother going over the hundreds of subspecies and variants that Mizutsune has. I think her and Naga have the most of any individual monster, but one I have fought is the Violet Mizutsune, which I do not like as much and therefore will be sitting in the don't want category. I've had to farm her an unreal amount for some armor pieces, and her fight is one of those that grinds on me far too much at this point. The same Mizitsune we all know and love, but give her fire attacks. Not a massive change, but it just bored me after a few rounds. If you just refer to the previous entry, except swap Mizitsune for Almudron and Violet for Magma, and the majority of the argument stays relatively the same, except for the fact that I actually don't mind Magma Almudron. I've also had to farm him, but honestly, I think the fight is just as good, if not better, than regular Almudron. I can definitely see Almudron coming back, maybe not Magma so much, but I'd quite like to see him happen. And look at these armor sets. These are probably some of the coolest sets in the game, and I would love to see them on a next-gen console. Next up is a monster that right away is going in the one category, and I will not have any slander whatsoever for him. In fact, let me ring you all in. Listen to this theme and tell me that it is one of the best themes Rise has to offer. The little penis guy gets to stay. Gos Harag, with unironically the best intro title ever, is a good fight for me. I always enjoy coming up against this Oni Bear thing. He uses his frost breath to either wield a great sword or a hammer type thing. He almost seems like a bigger, better Arzuros fight. I would like to see him back in Wilds just to see what kind of turf wars we can get with him. Imagine him fighting the Doshaguma, it'd be great. Killing another 3 birds with 1 stone, Wind Serpent Ibushi, Thunder Serpent Nawa, and Nawa the All-Mother, never returning. Rathian I adore, and I'm unsure as to whether it's because I fought her an unholy amount to farm up enough items for the melting pot, or because she's genuinely just a pleasure to go up against. Besides the fact she'd be trialed in a court of law for using child soldiers, she really holds herself well in fights, using string shots, fire breath, and standard leg swings to hit you, and is likely the most satisfying and rewarding hunt for me to go on. Being a hammer bro, I love hitting things hard and seeing the parts broken screen pop up, and since Rathian can reweave webs onto her legs, every time you get rid of them, it counts as another break, and stunning her means she leaves her head low and, more importantly, perfectly still, so getting that big bang 5 attack off is always satisfying to me.
Do you have any ibuprofen? I got a headache.
Pyarachnicodaki gives it more fire-based attacks, but it's still really fun to fight. Rachna and Pyarachna are hardly the first spider web-weaving monsters to have been introduced into the Monster Hunter games, and are hardly the coolest. I mean, Actal Car literally builds itself a fucking mech, but in terms of whether or not they come back in Wilds is unlikely, purely because of the already confirmed existence of Lala Barina, and I doubt Capcom want to incur the wrath of thousands of arachnophobes. If they did manage to squeeze their way in though, I wouldn't be disappointed. Chameleos is a sick idea for a monster. A chameleon elder dragon sounds cool in theory, and putting it into practice just works. The nickname of Ancient Phantom is just
so good.
I would definitely love to see him back in Wilds. Give me one good reason why I should feel any disdain whatsoever for Crimson Glow Valstrax. Spoiler alert, you cannot. The idea of this being a rocket dragon, sick. The fact that he has an attack named Ambush where he just dive bombs you from the sky, sick. And the theme, my god, it's an absolute certified banger. Regular Valstrax I haven't fought, but I can't imagine he presents anything more to the table that Crimson Glow hasn't already brought. And when it came out as an urgent quest, it took me god knows how long to complete, to the point where I had to make all but one piece of his armor purely just from base drops. But finally, getting that kill was an absolutely brilliant feeling, and I definitely want him to come back. And finally, on to Sunbreak. Since I've had very little experience with most of the monsters still to be covered, I'm going to rapid fire the last 15 monsters just to put you out of your misery. Daimyo Hermitar, I like, a big crab fella that deserves some more screen time. Garangom is a brilliant monster and was the first hammer I farmed for in Sunbreak. He can return with no qualms, however the same will be said for the rest of the 3 lords that I'm unsure as to whether the return will happen or not. Shogun Senator, another crab, but one I like less. Him and Daimyo have had Gravios and Monoblow skulls on their back, and it kind of seems like a f*** you, these monsters are dead and never returning, but with the Razor Senator wearing a Glavenus skull, never say never. I was happy to see some form of Odogaron appreciation in Rise, and Lunagaron lived up to the expectations, especially with a good enraged phase where he gets bigger and more bipedal. I would love to see him return. Astalos is another monster whose armor I wear frequently now. It just looks sick, and the fact that he can use his tail as a sort of lightsaber is also a major highlight. I'd like to fight him again in next gen. Seregios, on the other hand, he does have a similar build and fighting style to Rathalos, but uses his scales as projectiles as opposed to melee weaponry. Staying on the other hand, his fight doesn't hit for me, and I'd be fine leaving him in Rise. Espinas and Flaming Espinas are peak monsters for me, and I would definitely love to see them back in Wilds. Yes, they deal in poison, but farming them both enough for their armor pieces meant I can partially avoid the poison attacks. And in terms of looks, I think they are up in my top 5 of all time. Gormagala was a fine fight for me. I like the debuff where if you don't damage him enough, then you get a damage and healing reduction, but if you do manage to deal enough damage, you get a buff instead. It's a really creative way of forcing aggression in a fight. But Chaotic Gormagala gave me far too much grief to consider him for a rematch. Why have I fallen? Why have I failed? Just as I reached the heavens where I belonged, I was rejected. Fucking too right, son. Piss off. Shigara Magala, on the other hand, I had no clue was an Elder Dragon till my trap didn't work, but is definitely a better gore fight, and I wouldn't mind a return for him. As to not finish on a sour note, Amatsu can kindly fuck off, I don't want him. Malzeno is a brilliant flagship and follows on many of the same strings I touched upon with Magnamalo. He's tough to face but not impossible, depending on whether or not he's enraged, can be vastly different in attack style due to the curio. Would like a return but is most likely to be in the DLC, and unfortunately again I'm not far enough through the story to have fought Primordial Malzeno yet. And finally, the big bad of Sunbreak, Geismagor. If I were to ask you what animals you think Monster Hunter monsters are based off, I think you'd say dragons, gorillas, T-Rexes, granted a few crabs, but this would not be one of them. I think the Geismagor fight can be a bit slow at points, and maybe there are a few too many ecological advantages placed around the arena, but to finish off the Sunbreak DLC, especially with the turret and the ballista portions, I think that he holds good stead amongst the community. It is unfortunate though that with the Skybound Dragonator that we will in all likelihood never see Geismagor return. And there we go. All 129 monsters reviewed and placed in a tier list based on whether or not they are likely for Wilds and if I'd want them there. Just for clarification again, this is my opinion and is in no way a spoiler for who is guaranteed a return and who isn't, but please feel free to drop me your unpopular opinions on who you think is likely to return. Best believe I'll have a PS5 when this comes out, and videos are all to be made on the monsters new to the region, plus maybe a few extras here and there. But thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in Monster Hunter Wilds. Fabiga.
Yeah, you go. Good. Oh yeah, yours is easier as well, isn't it? My turn now. No! Don't you f***ing dare!
Right! I have had enough! Here we go, this one's it. My turn.
Please. No, it's not. It's it. Yes!
God, can I break his legs, please? Like f***ing Ronnie Cray.
Me and Chris are going for like a live action fan.
I might faint. Yeah.
I come here for a fucking shootout, right? Proper shootout with some proper men.
That's a rolling pig.
Who are you, Fanny Craddock? The baking a cake with like me f***ing candles?